how do I get to work with you? And I kind of sat back and went, what are you talking about? I don't even know anything about podcasts. And I was just like, oh yeah, that's what I did 6 months ago. And it's like, okay, people need this information. People are searching for it. Let's provide it. I think as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we feel lonely. We feel like we're on this journey alone.
Yeah.
But so is every other entrepreneur that is in your same industry. They all feel that same way.
Hey everyone, we have a really special episode today. If you're listening to the Keep What You Earn podcast or the Small Business Tax Savings podcast, we're actually doing a crossover episode with myself and Mike Jesowshek, who's also a CPA. Mike, introduce yourself and say hi, and then I'll do the same.
Yeah, Shannon, happy to be here with you, and this is going to be a fun one. My name is Mike Jesowshek, CPA and host of the Small Business Tax Savings podcast, and really kind of just here of a mission as similar to Shannon's is to just help business owners be aware of kind of the tax saving strategies that are available to them.
And my name's Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA, fractional CFO, and I, similar to Mike, like you said, I'm on a mission here to empower more small business owners through knowledge and provoking curiosity on these topics, especially in times when it feels really overwhelming and stressful to be a business owner. So we're really excited to be here. And the first thing I want to talk through, Mike, is what's going on right now with small business owners, the hesitation, the stress, the overwhelm, and the fear that we're all feeling right now, either through headlines or just what's going on. Like, what's your pulse of it right now? What are you hearing from business owners?
Well, I think it's always about, drilling into what the news is telling you. But this is as business owners at its core, right? I think business owners are always filled with this idea of fear. And so if it's not the news talking to them, it's something internally talking to them. And I've been a business owner of some sort for all of my career. And I've always had this standpoint of, what do I do tomorrow when everything breaks and falls? And that's never happened. But I've always had that fear. And it's what I go through every day as a business owner, is saying like, okay, I need to make sure I got something set up or some type of foundation built so that when everything crumbles tomorrow, which is never going to happen, I have kind of a path forward to go for that. And it wasn't until recently where I've been able to like just kind of fight myself past that and be like, stop this. It hasn't happened in 20 years. It's not going to happen. But what can we do? What can I do to myself or tell myself to help avoid that line of thinking? And I think that's the biggest part. Is there's fears there. We just got to embrace the fear and say, okay, that's part of where we're in. If we're working as an executive at a company, there's going to be fear there too. So there's fear in things that you do. Embrace it, but then how can you also ensure that it doesn't stop you? And if anything, how could you use that fear to motivate you in your business?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, a good fire under my butt does a good job of, motivating. And I think with small business owners I talk to, there's a lot of hesitation on making a leap, making a commitment, becoming a small business owner, going all in on the business because of all the responsibilities, like whether it be taxes, right, filings, legal stuff, and all of it's super overwhelming and stressful that they hesitate because they're like, I don't know if I'm ready for all these responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. And what I always say too is collaborate with people in your industry, collaborate with your competitors, if you want to call it that, because they're going through the same thing that you're doing. And if you're collaborating with them, you can share things that are working for you, and they can share things that are working for them, and where your struggles are. And I honestly think that was a shift too. And I mean, we're sitting here talking on a podcast, and we both have similar podcasts. And that to me is not anything that I'm concerned about. There's a point in your life where you have to say, there is so much business out there. Instead of looking at everybody else's competition as someone that's going to take this away from you or anything like that, why not work together? And why not share with you what's working for me, or you share with me what's working for you, and collaborate together so that we can try to tackle this and help everybody that we serve even better. Some people are going to like my personality. Some people are going to like your personality. Some people are going to live closer to you and feel more comfortable with that. And we serve different industries, and there's so many different changes and aspects about competitors that I started to erase that idea of a competitor across my mind. And when you come to accountants, it's funny because accountants are very guarded.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard to get to an accountant and try to share tips, because they're going to be like, they could be halfway across the country serving everybody local, and they don't want to share anything good with you because they're afraid that you're going to come after their clients or something. But when you start to erase that term of competitor in your mind and think of how can we collaborate together? We're all on the same journey. Let's work together on this point. And I think that can help with some of those fears or those struggles that you're going through. Because guess what? The person that's doing the same thing as you down the road is also going through those same struggles.
I totally agree. And I think that especially like in the accounting profession that we're both in, it doesn't serve anyone to like try to hold anyone else back. Like by trying to either take business away or detract from someone else earning business does not make you better off. It's just like, putting someone down
Mhm.
doesn't lift yourself up. So all the time, and you guys know, I've had several CPAs on this show. If you're listening to Keep What You Earn, we have CPAs all the time on the show because why? They bring unique perspective, and there's always something else to learn and something else to see from their viewpoint. And what's really interesting is, and I just talked about this on another episode, you want to find someone who has your risk tolerance. You're going to want to find someone who has your type of approach and that you click with and communicates well with you. And who am I to get in between a client finding that for themselves if it's not with me? Because it
Mhm.
probably wouldn't work out with me anyway. It's going to sound funny, but it's like dating. It's like you can't guarantee they're a good match anyway. They're not yours to own. It's our duty to find the best matches possible. And frankly, for you and I as CPAs, we're on the same team in our industry, just trying to get people to listen to us. Like we're out there
Yeah,
just trying to
exactly.
fulfill on our mission, and we're getting in our own way if we're trying to like stab each other in the back. So I don't believe in that either, was competition whatsoever. I'm like, we're on the same team in this industry, also trying to combat what's hitting really everybody right now. It's joining forces. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you is currently we're in 2022. It's not that often that our type of subject matter hits the headlines. Um, but when it is, usually it's not great. And there's a lot of news right now about like the IRS and audits and them catching up and, funding and taxes and all these things. And I feel like a lot of people are turning to us for insight. What is the advice that you're offering small business owners right now that are approaching you that way?
I think, to be honest, I'm excited about this. I don't know if you've been trying to get a hold of the IRS or
I
trying to
know.
get stuff in the mail or something answered, and it's just impossible right
Mhm.
now. And so, as far as I'm concerned, when we're advising people and we're working with clients, and you're the same way, I know this, we're doing everything according to law.
Mhm.
Even if we're aggressive with what we're doing, the type of strategies that we're implementing it, we would never advise someone to do something illegal. And so, if anything, all I'm saying is with added potential, maybe audits will increase or something like that. But all that means to you is that these things that we've been saying is to provide as documentation, keep your receipts, hiring your kids, make sure you're recording everything, make sure you have the right documents in place. All those things we've been always been saying is now you just maybe want to do it. Maybe you weren't doing it for the past couple years. Maybe start doing it, but it's nothing changes from what we've been doing because we're still using the tax law the way it was written. So I don't know. I find it crazy. There's so many people that are saying, oh, people are going to get audited, they're going to start targeting small businesses and all that. And I think that if you're doing things the right way, keeping good documentation, still being aggressive, still utilizing the tax code the way it was written, I'm not concerned about anything.
Yeah, you have nothing to worry about, unless you've been procrastinating, and not listening to your accountant.
Hmm.
But I think that, if hopefully if you're listening to our shows, you're not in that position. That's the goal.
Not to mention, too, there's so many people are always scared of the IRS and state agencies. The people that you're working with, they're normal people. They're
Yeah.
people just like us too. That's just their profession. Like, and so I've been through audits, and I don't even know if they're necessarily audits, but just IRS asks for additional documentation. You're providing. You're having that conversation with them. I've never had a bad conversation with someone from a state or IRS. It's always been good, and they're probably looking at, and those people that are really abusing the system and trying to take advantage, being greedy, those are the people that maybe they do have bad experiences because they can see right through it. But if you're just making honest mistakes and making adjustments from that, they're normal people. They're willing to work with you. So I always say, don't
Yeah.
be afraid of the IRS. Don't be afraid of the state agencies. In fact, just don't ignore them and just get back to them. They just want to resolve it just as quick as you do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Uh, what advice do you have when it comes to finding good information and good advice right now when it comes to taxes or business strategy or financial management? Because there's a lot of messages going on out there. There's a lot of social media, there's a lot of articles, there's all this stuff, right? And everyone's friend is now suddenly an expert. But what do you recommend in terms of like distilling that down, where to find good advice, when you have a question, how to handle it, right? What are your best pieces of advice for folks who are just wanting some answers to questions but don't know where to turn?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I struggle with this not necessarily on the tax side, accounting side, but in different areas of my life. And one thing that I've always done is I like to create consistency. Consistency with who I'm getting information from. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be one person that I'm constantly getting it from, but just I'm following people that I have looked at and say, okay, they're credible, or they've been doing this for 10 years and they have four years of podcast, or they have whatever. I'm looking at that and looking at them as credible. So I always say, what is the credibility of that person that you're following, and then create consistency. You're going to hear a ton of different stuff about the same exact topic or strategy, and some of them aren't going to align. And so that's where when you don't see something align, you kind of go back to that original source you have and say, okay, this guy's saying this girl's saying this, how can I create that bridge and say, okay, where is there some information being missed?
Mhm.
I'm a golfer, and so I'm always looking at golf tips and strategies and how to make my swing better because it's awful. But one thing I would always listen to a new person on YouTube teaching golf, and it got to the point where everyone was contradicting each other, and here I am trying to take in information from this. And so I was like, okay, I know 5 guys, 5 girls that I really love the content that they're putting out. I'm just going to keep it consistent. Like, I'm listening to their tips. If I see somewhere else, I'll try to find that consistency in somebody that I do know and have vetted as someone that I trust. So I think that's the biggest thing is create consistency, but also try to look for who you feel is credible. And I think that just by listening, just by watching, just by hearing the stuff that they're saying, and then following up and doing your own research on it, can kind of say, hey, what's the credibility meter at on this type of thing?
Yeah.
Because the thing is too, and when talking about tax strategies, is someone on TikTok can describe a strategy one way, and you're like, that can't be real. It's real, but they're forgetting to say, X, Y, and Z, the key important factors, like, hiring your kids as an example. You can hire your kids and they potentially pay no income taxes on it. But that one sentence can be taken and turned in different ways. And now you have someone that's got a 1-year-old that isn't doing any work. And there's like, oh yeah, I heard on TikTok you can pay my 1-year-old $12,000 and they don't pay taxes on it. I'm like, okay, well, that could be true, but you have to look into the details further than that.
Yeah, and we have to keep in mind that most of these people who are creating such content, they have 30 to 60 seconds to grab your attention, and that is not enough time to give you the nuance of, the fine print of how it
Mm-hmm.
actually works. What I tell everyone is to go in with the mindset of they are there to get your attention for 30 seconds. So they're going to give you the highlight reel of what can happen in an optimal scenario, and then it's up to you to decipher how you can use that in your unique situation. But that's where you
Love
need to
that.
have the help of a pro on your side. And when it comes to seeking advice, we were just talking about this before we hit record. In our approach to education, which is like a lot of accountants out there withhold information. It's my belief that our industry, Mike, used to be selling information, right? Like there used to be walking encyclopedias of tax knowledge that like they were, Fort Knox of I'm not telling you that unless you pay me. And now my freaking lamp on my bookshelf can answer me questions about IRS tax code, which is amazing. I can tell Google, Siri, and all these things, and they will answer questions. I have tried this, and I'm like, wow. So, what is our new role, right? What is our new function as CPAs if we're not selling information, right? And I don't know about, I should say, I don't know about you because I haven't asked you this, but I do kind of know this, that we probably share the belief that information should be free, that, information should be abundant and free out there enough to help someone. But maybe, if it helps the 80, 90% of people, right? Of those situations. Tell me about what you were saying before we hit record. You were talking about like, you didn't come from tax either. So you were researching questions. Just tell me that story.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that we related to, but I didn't come from tax, and so I was working with tax accountants that I would refer clients out to, and but every once in a while they'd come and ask me a question. I'm like, well, I should probably know that answer. I should be able to at least give them an answer. So I'd reach out to the tax accountant, and the question would be very simple, very basic, and they're always like, well, it depends. We need more details. We need to know what else is going on in this situation. And every time I would ask about a question, something like that, it always would come up to it depends, and I would get pushed down the road. And again, I don't know if it's because they didn't want to give misinformation. They wanted to talk to the client specifically. I don't know what it is, but it was consistently happening with many different accountants. And so finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I know it depends. Everything depends, and everything is specific to your situation. That's what we always say. There's disclaimers on everything, like go talk to your attorney, go talk to your accountant. Here's some really good advice, but I'll talk to somebody else about it. We know everything depends, but so much information is so consistent to the point where it doesn't depend. So for 80% of the cases, or at least 80% of a tax strategy, it really doesn't depend. Like, here are some key things to think about. And then the remaining 20% of implementation of that strategy, maybe it does depend. And that's where you want to kind of fine tune it for your specific situation. But that's where I started. I got into tax because I didn't have a resource that I could go to that could just give me straight, basic, general answers to items. And I knew that there was generality to so much of the things that we talk about. And so that's really how I got started into the podcasting area, is because I was like, people need to know this type of stuff. And the problem that if a client was coming to me and then I just tell them, well, it depends, that client is losing out on a tax strategy that they could very well be taking advantage of and that they totally qualify for. But I just gave them a blanket answer of it depends. And I'd be curious, Shannon,
Mm-hmm.
I have a theory about this, but I've always wondered, why don't your traditional accountant give much tax planning advice? Most accountants out there don't give a ton of tax planning advice.
They
They
don't.
look at tax planning as estimates and stuff like that. And so I'm just curious, do you have a thought
I
on I have a theory, but I think it's a little bit
I
out
also have
there,
a very
but
like candid opinion too, where I go, if you're not going to give tax planning advice, don't complain when your clients show up unprepared in April. So
mm,
like if you're not going to contribute to a better pool of clients, don't be surprised when you don't have a better pool of clients. One thing that drives me crazy is the lack of proactive change in our industry in reversing a lot of the things that annoy us as accountants, right? So one of the ways is to teach tax planning concepts and to teach good habits. So what I call like the tax hygiene, right? Of how to
mhm.
do things properly. But I think that people hesitate. Accountants are very risk averse. So we have been taught, and I know this from my degree and from CPA exams and everything, is like, be careful what you say because what you say will be used against you. We all act like we're all constantly going to have every email subpoenaed and everything that comes out of our mouth will be read in court. Like, that's how we are programmed. And coming from someone, interestingly enough, who has had that happen, I have been deposed in Washington, D.C. in front of the PCAOB. I have had my laptop taken. I have had all my emails read. That was not fun. But even coming from someone
I
who's
can
had that
imagine.
happen, I still am very liberal with what I say. And the reason why is because I know for a fact that no one is actually going to go. It's the risk, it's the cost benefit. Like, if hundreds of thousands or thousands of taxpayers have access to information that will help them get 80% of the way to the end zone on a particular tax question or issue, that is worth it to me for that like one person who's probably going to misinterpret something, misapply it and not get someone's help in actually executing it and potentially suffer from that. But again, I disclaim it and say like, I don't know your whole situation, but for most people and for general reasons, like I use a lot of terms too, Mike. Like, it appears that generally what I commonly see is if you can, um, what's the word? Like qualify. If you can qualify what you're saying, I think it can still be very effective while also getting the point across that, hey, this is a little bit nuanced and it's kind of like asking a doctor for health advice. I don't know your whole situation, but if I were to make certain assumptions, this is what I would say. That is a very healthy answer in my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it really goes back into one thing that you touched on is like if I can get my content out to so many people and that one person misinterprets it and that turns into a bad situation,
Mhm.
I'm happy with that. And I think this kind of goes back to that collaboration idea that
Yeah.
we originally talked about. Why are people afraid to collaborate? And it might be a point where they're just too greedy. I don't know. I think if we look at our situation, is my true mission
Mhm.
is to help small business owners understand and know the tax strategies that are available to them. My goal or my mission is to help small business owners. Now, ultimately, I need to make a living. So
Yeah.
ultimately, there is some type of monetization that I plan to do with that. But if my only idea was monetization, I wouldn't want to collaborate with other people. I wouldn't want to help with that end goal of helping small business owners. And I think that's the way that we look at things differently. And then I think that every industry can look at things differently is what is your end goal and how can you help that end goal while also monetizing it and making a living for yourself in between there, and that competitor next door is not the person standing in the way of making that happen.
Yeah. Who are you ultimately serving is the question. Who are you in service of? Are you in service of yourself, your family, which again, no judgment, no, no problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But are you in service of the small business owner? In which case, don't get in the way of them getting the information they need and don't get in the way of them, implementing something that could be useful for them. Um, and I think that there's a lot of like old paradigms in our industry around, that time is money. So if they need me to do certain things, I need to, charge hourly or to, um, there's just like all these like hesitations. I feel like there's this constant like tension between accounting clients and accountants where clients don't know what to actually order, like what to ask for, and the accountants are
Yeah,
waiting for them to ask them questions, and we're in this weird tense stalemate, like two magnets with the same polarization. Like that's how it always
so
feels
true.
because they get nothing done if somebody isn't willing to come and overextend into the other zone and say, "Hey, how can I help you?"
Yeah. One thing that I read a while back, and it was a book called They Ask, You Answer. And the concept of this, it was the person who wrote the book owned like a pool company. They built pools, and so what he did is he started to take all the questions that his clients were asking, the potential sales guys or sales calls they were asking on sales calls, and he started to take all those and just answer them in the form of a blog post. And within that idea, so he's taking all of these trade secrets in this pool building business and putting them all up on a blog. He would then also look at his competitors out there and he would write reviews on his competitors or talk about his competitors on his site, and not like bad talking, but saying, hey, they do these things really, really
Yeah.
well. And finding good things that his competitor was doing and outlining it on his blog. And so people would search like top 5 pool companies in X and so city or whatever it was, and his blog post would show up, and it would be 3 competitors and then his company on there. And but the concept behind the idea was that, hey, I'm going to provide so much free information. If somebody wants to learn everything they want about this topic, I'm going to provide it to them. And I know ultimately that's going to lead to monetization down the road. I know ultimately people are going to say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to build my own pool. I want to buy somebody. I want somebody to do it for me. And who is probably the first person I'm going to ask to do that? The person that I read 30 articles from telling me how to build my own pool is probably the person I'm going to ask to build my pool because they know what they're doing. And I think that that's kind of this idea of this content creation is provide a lot of content and information. So many people are going to take it and run with it and never talk to you again. Great. You're helping those people out. At some point, people are going to come and want to work with you.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that with this is another conversation I recently had around specifically accountants, but this goes with anyone. If you're a small business owner, this is true for everyone in your industry, which is like why we have to focus on trust-based marketing. I think that's the best marketing is when you can build trust and reliability in that exact example, which is you're front of mind if you're the one who's been in their inbox this whole time offering that value. Even if it doesn't get opened, um, even if there's no action taken, even if there's nothing monetized in that email, even if it's just a, hey, I thought of you, I had this tip to share with you. If you can truly step out of your own self interest for a second and serve your customer, and you can just deliver value and build trust, that is like the solid brick foundation that you need in good marketing to have a really like long road ahead. I mean, I don't know, I haven't used any like inorganic, I haven't used any paid ads or anything like that. I've just been pretty much all my business comes from showing up consistently, as I'm sure it has for you too, because you've been in the podcasting game much longer.
Yeah, it's so true. It was funny when we first started our podcast. I had a couple of YouTube videos up on YouTube, and someone on our team said, "Well, why don't you throw them on a podcast?" I didn't know anything about podcasts. I
Yeah.
didn't listen to them, so I put them up 3 episodes. Like 6 months later, someone said, "Hey, I've been listening to your episodes on your podcast. How do I get to work with you?" And I kind of sat back and went, "What are you talking about? I don't even know anything about podcasts." And I was just like, "Oh yeah, that's what I did 6 months ago." And it's like, okay, people need this information. People are searching for it. Let's provide it. And this is not specific to accountants or tax or any other world.
No.
People are looking for so much information, and they want to learn it. And they will eventually get to a point where they say, "Hey, I can either do this on my own," or they're going to get to a point where they're like, "I just want to hire someone because I think I know what I'm doing." But at the same time, like, we just built something in our house where I was kind of trying to do it all on my own, and I got to the point where I was like, I think I know how to do it because I read this guy watches YouTube videos, everything else, but I'm just going to hire him because I don't think I'm doing it right. I probably was doing it right, but peace of mind is when I went to hire them and said, I want your help on this.
Yeah.
So any industry can do that. Now, we'll say it takes time. This is a very long game approach. But if you can see, again, if your passion is to help your end user, kind of like you mentioned, who are you looking to serve? And if that passion really is the end user of who you serve, I think you can enjoy that time together, enjoy that time of putting content out there. Not to mention, Shannon, you were talking about this before we recorded. A lot of times we use podcasts too to refer to direct people that have questions to us. How do I hire my kid? What's a 1099?
Yeah.
Check out this episode, then let's talk.
Exactly.
And I've used that especially well. If I can tell someone, "Hey, check out this episode, then let's connect and let me know what questions you have." That conversation that we had was so much more productive.
Mm-hmm.
We got done in 20 minutes, what maybe would have took an hour. In those 20 minutes, we were implementing versus just talking high level strategy because they did all that from reading a blog post or, listening to a podcast episode. So, I recommend people that are looking to get into this area or are looking, want to help grow in an organic way like this. Check out the book They Ask You Answer. That was kind of one of the motivations that I had to get into this. But there's a lot of opportunities out there.
Oh, totally. And you mentioned like we were talking about how this turns into like an FAQ library, like we were saying. And
Yeah.
Conversely, like when you have access to good resources, I think that what people misunderstand is that when we say that you need to add value to your customer, that you have to be the source of all answers. And that's not the case. So one thing I mentioned to you was that I use your podcast as FAQ. I actually send episodes of yours out to people. So if you're listening to this and you've interacted with me in the DMs, I may have sent you one of Mike's episodes at some point and said, listen to this. He does a great job of explaining it better than I could right now, this second. Why recreate something if someone's already done it well? Why not just say, save everyone the time? And what am I afraid of? That they're going to go hire you? And like as much as they could, because you're great and the podcast is great. I also have faith that the value I just delivered is saving them a lot of time. I just showed up and I delivered value in the form of a quick answer, a strong resource, and frankly, enough confidence to say, hey, I could explain this to you, but here's a link where Mike does it in 10 minutes. And I just want you to listen to that because I thought he did a great job of explaining that. Let me give that right to you. I have no qualms about sending people to other CPAs if I have material that actually serves it. So there's another motivator too to like produce content because I'm going, there are people sharing my content. There are other accountants that I'm sure are sharing mine and sharing yours. And that's really cool when you almost have a free marketing and sales team, advocates out there helping spread the message.
So true. Yeah, no, that's so true and on point. And I think that just goes again to this idea, the fear of that the guy next door, the girl next door, that business next door is going to take everything. Start to erase that from your mind. And again, look at ways that you can collaborate, because I think that you will find a lot of that fears get taken away. In my business and businesses that I've been, I think as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we feel lonely. We feel like we're on this journey alone.
Yeah.
But so is every other entrepreneur that is in your same industry. They all feel that same way. So why not take that fear and work together on it and say, hey, you're lonely. You feel alone. I feel alone. We do the same exact thing. Why don't we get together and be like, okay, what's working for you? How are you fighting this? What are you doing here? Because so many times the problem that I have, somebody's fixed. And that problem that person has, I fixed. But we don't know about it. And so that gives a lot of opportunities. Now, what I'm not saying is go back and try to copy everybody. Like when we talk about collaboration, it's not this idea of creating replicas of the same thing. No, it's like you do things your way, they do things their way, but how can you kind of share and tweak different systems or processes, or whatever it is, that make it work for the way that you do business? And so I think that's a clear indicator, is that when you're looking at collaboration, it's not trying to create like a franchise or a McDonald's version of this. That's not it. It's just taking wins and losses and helping people continue along that journey.
Oh, totally. And it's that abundance versus the scarcity mindset. I think that's actually the root of all of it. What you were talking about with why don't accountants like embrace this? And I think it's a scarcity mindset, because I think we've all been trained that like a client that you take is a client I don't take. There's some type of like client pool in the form of a pie somewhere. And if you get a piece of the pie, I don't get a piece. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a really toxic mindset for a business owner to have, because there's enough to go around for everyone, especially right now, and especially for our profession, because we are more in demand than ever. And there are less professionals coming up through the the order, I guess, through college majors and so on. I'm actually speaking to a group next week, talking to college students, trying to inspire them to become accounting majors, because that is a challenge right now. So
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing to worry about in spreading more of the same message. And I think that's one thing that we need to get across to the profession as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Mike, I've loved this conversation. I know I could chat with you forever on it, but I want to sort of wrap things up here for our listeners and just do a quick overview. Where can folks hear more from you? Tell us about your podcast, where they can find more. And because you're on multiple media, so I want you to just tell us all about everything you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just type in Small Business Tax Savings Podcast on really any type of podcasting platform, you'll find us there. You can also find us on our podcast website, where we do a blog post for every podcast as well, taxsavingspodcast.com. We also have a free Facebook group that you can join. Just go into Facebook, type in Small Business Tax Secrets, and answer a few questions. And you'll probably see a lot of Shannon responding in there as well, as she's been super helpful in our group, responding to people. So yeah, those are kind of the three main areas. You can find pretty much everything as a central hub at taxsavingspodcast.com.
Yeah, and if you're looking for more from us, my podcast is called Keep What You Earn, and we have several different resources. We have online courses for new business owners if you're really looking to DIY. But one of the biggest things we have is our Keep What You Earn community. Much like Mike's community, Small Business Tax Secrets, we also have a listener community where you can interact with me, our guests, and ask questions in a safe space. We call it the Judgment and Jargon Free Zone. So if you want to come join us, there's going to be a link in the show notes for that as well. Mike, thanks so much for joining me for this conversation. I've been looking forward to it. I've been a fan of your podcast. I learned a lot of what I know now because of the way you explain things. So I just want to say thank you for putting that content out there, because it is making an impact.
Yeah, Shannon, thanks for putting this together, and let's do this more often. It's a lot of fun. It's fun to hear from other people that are doing something similar too, and share that with other business owners. I think that's been an awesome conversation. So thanks for putting this together.
Of course. All right, we'll see you guys next time.